1. Several years ago, in the mid-80s, at a small neighborhood grocery store I worked at. I had recently become assistant manager at the store, and was working until close by myself. Our store was in a suburban neighborhood, and it was on the edge of town, meaning about 10 minutes to the right was a more populated area, with a McDonald's and strip mall, and 5 minutes to the left was going into rural farm areas. We were located in a part that was a mix of business and houses. We were the only businesses in our area still open, as we were surrounded by doctors' offices, a dentist, and an insurance office that closed earlier that day. It was a Friday night, and a couple of the employees I was supposed to work with had either called off or went home early, if I recall correctly. So I was stuck by myself towards closing time. Not that it was a big deal, as our store was rather small compared to the big box grocery stores that were starting to crop up around the area. Business was winding down, and I was excited. It was about 9 p.m, as I was planning to meet up with some friends at an under-21 club later that night. It was late fall, as I remembered getting dark around 5 p.m. I was about to lock up in a few minutes, and decided it was a good time to take a bathroom break. Now, our store bathroom was one of those one-occupancy toilet rooms where you had to lock the door when you were using it. There was a block window towards the top that was frosted so people couldn't look in. But I noticed the shape of a face pressed against the window. I let out a slight scream, and the shape moved away. I stayed frozen out of fear in the bathroom. About a minute later, I heard footsteps come by the bathroom door and saw the handle jiggle back and forth. My heart was thumping so hard I thought I was going to have a heart attack right there. Then it stopped, and I heard the footsteps walk away. Now, for some reason, I thought maybe I was being irrational, and it was a last-minute customer who came in to use the restroom. Despite the creepy face I saw in the window, which is the side edge of the store property where customers don't go. So I mustered up the courage to walk back out into the store. I didn't see anybody, so I quickly locked the door and did a quick sweep by the aisles to make sure no one was in the store. I flipped the sign to say closed and dimmed the lights. That is when I noticed a pickup truck in the parking lot. It was parked toward the end of the lot where my car was, but it was facing the store, and suddenly flicked its headlights on and off towards the store. I ran into our small office and was freaking out. I wanted to call the police, but our store owner had always discouraged us not to call the police, even if we were robbed, to just hand over the cash in the register. His philosophy was calling the police would bring negative attention, that the store was unsafe. Customers would go elsewhere and his insurance rates would go up. So here is a guy in a truck obviously up to no good, and he is between my car and the store, so I can't even make a run for my car. And was it just one guy or more? I wasn't sure if he was signaling at me or someone outside. I couldn't tell. Would they break in and come after me? My heart was going crazy, and I was thinking irrationally. I was thinking of all the places I could potentially hide in this store. And then I got an idea. Our truck loading dock was around the back and was a way out. I opened it and made a run for it, running through people's backyards all the way home. I told my family, who did call the police, and my family drove back to the store in the middle of the night to get my car. There were no other cars in the lot other than mine, so the truck left at some point. The police were not sure if they had come to rob me or for me, since I was working alone. After I left, there was nothing noticeably missing, since the loading dock was left open. I quit this job shortly after, but often wondered what was in the works for that night. 2. Please be aware the following story contains themes of attempted rape. I will never forget this encounter. It changed my life forever. I was 19 and hanging out with a friend who was older. She was almost 30. It was one of those friendships where, even though there was an age difference, we were the same age maturity-wise. She was a train wreck, and I wasn't much better. We were the type of girls who go to rock shows and ask musicians to autograph our boobs. I was the type of girl who had been nicknamed Scrapper, because no matter how stacked against me the odds were, I always managed to figure it out. Yes, I was wild, but that didn't mean I deserved what was about to happen to me. Some guy she knew had just bought a local nightclub and was in the process of renovating it. We planned to meet him and his friend at the club for some drinks and a puff. We got to the club and started drinking, smoking, and dancing. I remember thinking that it was really cool to be in a nightclub and to have the whole place to ourselves. I will always remember the song Around the World by Daft Punk, blaring through the speakers as we danced. My friend seemed to be getting along very well with his friend. As a matter of fact, they were making out so aggressively it was a little uncomfortable. So, Clubman looked at the X-rated activities of my friend, looked at me and winked. He then asked me if I would like to see what he had done with the downstairs of the club. Now, I will be the first to admit maybe I was a little naive here. But being drunk and stoned didn't exactly help my spidey senses tingle in the face of potential danger. I followed him down the stairs into a very large, poorly lit room. He took my hand and led me to the other end, helping me maneuver over lumber, cords, and tools that were everywhere. At one point, it became so dark, I told him that it was creepy down there. He laughed, assured me everything was all right, and told me to stand right there while he went to turn on a light. A bright light came on, and at the same time I felt myself falling. He had shoved me hard, and I remember blinking because the light blinded me, but also because I was shocked that he was pushing me to the floor. I landed on something soft and springy. I turned my head and blinked furiously in the light, trying to see. I was laying on a very dingy mattress on the floor. Next to the mattress was a pile of porno mags and some rope. Understanding swept over me like a wave, and my heart started racing. Bewildered, I started to mutter, "No, I think you have the wrong idea here." I will never forget the image of the evil grin spreading across his face as I looked up at him from the mattress. "No, I think you have the wrong idea here," he said with his grin widening. He fell on top of me, at the same time putting his hand over my mouth. I remember a small scream escaped me as the weight of his body knocked the wind out of me. In that moment I became keenly aware of exactly where I was, alone on a mattress in a basement, with a strange man almost twice my age. The steady thumping bass from the club overhead made my heart sink. Even if I screamed, no one would hear me. My mind raced, and I began to regret every stupid decision I had made that led me to this moment. He began to push my legs apart using his legs, but his legs slipped on the pant legs of my jeans. Before I even knew what I was doing, I raised my knee with all of the force I could muster. I hit him hard directly in the family jewels, though I doubt anything precious could ever spring from his loins. So hard, I had a bruise on my knee. I ran toward the stairs, tripping and falling over tools as I went. I didn't look back, but I'm pretty sure I heard him vomit. I flew up the stairs and found my friend leaning against a wall making out with Club Creep's friend. I grabbed her hand and jerked her toward the door, breathlessly saying, "We have to go right now." Bewildered, she followed me to the car. We got in and peeled out. She kept asking me what was going on, but I couldn't answer yet. 10 minutes later, I pulled over the car, threw up, and finally dissolved into tears. I told her what had happened. She demanded we drive to the police station, but she drove because I was shaking too much. I told my story to the police, who immediately sent officers to the location. They did not find anyone there, but they did tell me they found a vomit-covered mattress in the basement. It was surrounded by porno mags, rope, zip ties, and even a pair of handcuffs. Upon hearing this, I vomited again. The police followed up with the club owner, who was definitely not club creep. The police searched for the man and his friend, but never found either one. Unfortunately, my friend had only met the guy once before, at a local bar, and had very little information to contribute. To the club creep, let's not meet again, but if we do, I'll make sure you can't reproduce. 3. A few years ago, our local newspaper posted an article about prostitutes in our town, interviewing them and having them talk about their thoughts and feelings on prostitution. I live somewhere this issue is very often up for discussion. Either way, this story is linked to that, because one of those prostitutes sounded a lot like me. By the way I'm wording this, I'm sure it's obvious that it wasn't me, and I've never worked as a prostitute. At the time, I was a student, doing things that students do, hanging at pubs and being hungover at lectures. Having had a hard time through high school, college was like a fresh breeze for me. I met my kind of people, got to choose the classes that I liked, and I felt for the first time that my life was going somewhere. For a 20-something girl with a pretty uneventful life, it was a good experience. As students do, I made a lot of new friends and started volunteering in organizations. In particular, there was this bar where I used to hang out, where I eventually started doing volunteer shifts. I liked the idea of a bar driven by students on a daily basis. And even though I didn't get any money for working there, the alcohol was cheap, and the community was great. I absolutely adored it there. A few months into this, there was this guy. He kept coming back, and he seemed to have taken a special interest in me. I didn't put too much into it at first. As you should be when working in a bar, I was always nice and polite. Greeted him and we did some small talk while I went around cleaning tables. After a while, it seemed like he was always there. He found me on Facebook, added me, and started chatting with me on a regular basis. Initially, there was nothing weird about the conversations, except a few jokes that seemed a little off. Like when he asked me what I did for a living and I told him the place where I worked, my part-time job, and actually made money. He joked about it being an escort service. I didn't know him very well, so it made me a little uncomfortable. But I wrote back no, it's not, and the conversation ended there. Over the next few months, things escalated. I didn't have shifts at the bar for a while, so I spent most of my days on the other end of the bar, being served beer instead of serving it. Again, the community was pretty great, so I usually came in at 10 in the morning, got some work done before classes or after classes, and spent all my free time hanging out with my friends at the pub. We were all pretty tight-knit, and I still talk to most of them to this day. Since I was now the one getting drunk, he seemed to be coming around more often. Most of his days seemed to consist of sitting alone and staring at us. Now, when I say staring, I don't mean looking at us. I mean intense stares, to the degree of which you can feel it, even when you can't see them. I started feeling bad for him. I suggested to my friends that we should invite him over, but one of the older regulars objected pretty harshly. She then proceeded to show me a website which allegedly was run by him. It was porn. At this time, I was very pronounced as an anti-porn activist, but I'm also generally very shy of conflict, so I shrugged it off, though I did decide not to invite him over to avoid conflict with the others, as they didn't seem too keen. He kept making small talk with me on a regular basis, whenever he'd see me there, and my friends kept telling me to stay away from him. I had to admit that the way he was always around and seemed to take a very special interest in me was getting slightly creepy, but no more than I could handle. I was sure he was just socially awkward. After all, he was in his 30s and hanging out, an awful lot in a place filled with what was mostly 20-year-olds. Most of the time he seemed to be alone as well. After months of this, I started getting more annoyed and a little scared. I was drunk and outside smoking, and he followed me outside, so we started talking. And I mentioned this whole thing about porn and my friends not being too fond of him. It turned out that the site was run by him, and he gave me a long rant about freedom of speech and porn being a legal business. Even though I never really objected to anything. Still very shy of conflict. I could tell he was really angry, to the point where he was shaking, and for a few seconds, I was scared he'd actually punch me. We got into a political discussion that did not end well, and eventually he threatened to sue both me and my friends for slander. He deleted me off his social media profiles, and for me that was the end of that. I didn't see him around for a while, and honestly, he wasn't really a face I would miss. Now, this is where the start of my story actually becomes relevant. A few weeks later, a friend of mine sends me a picture of things that had been posted on this guy's Facebook account after the fight. There were long rants with my name in them, links to the article I mentioned previously about the prostitute, that sounded an awful lot like me with my full name. He wrote that he had slept with me as a prostitute, that I was not worth the money spent, and that I was a disgrace to the entire sex profession. These posts went weeks back, and the last post had been made the day my friend sent me this. There were approximately 5 to 6 posts a day with my name in them. At this point I started getting scared. So I alerted the board at my college, and they said they'd look into it. Considering what happened next, my guess is the meeting didn't go very well. About a month later, a friend of mine pulled me aside at the pub. She said she had to show me something. She pulled up his website. He had made a picture slideshow with manipulated pornographic pictures with my face on them. I'd heard about revenge porn before, but I never really thought I'd be a victim of it. Especially not after what had, to me, just been a small political discussion while having a cigarette at a pub with someone who had been a regular for almost a year. I was devastated, and immediately contacted the cops, who made him take the pictures down, and I filed a restraining order. I haven't heard from him since. Hopefully I won't. Edit 1. Working volunteer at student pubs is very usual where I'm from. I'm from a small country in Europe, just to clarify. Edit 2. I probably should have specified, but this was not a very professional website. It looked like a website from the early 2000s, even though this all happened in 2011, and even though the pictures of my face were clearly manipulated, it was still super creepy. My guess is that the website was more for his own entertainment than anyone else. It seemed to be a running joke to check out his website once in a while and laugh at the content and how creepy he was. A joke I didn't really want to get into, since I thought of him as a nice guy until all of this went down. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 145. Thank you very much to everyone for allowing me to use their stories, it is greatly appreciated. And before I go on, can I just say, that boss in the story with the potential robbery, don't phone the police? Oh, I've had some stupid bosses in the years I worked in a convenience store, but none of them were dumb enough to tell you not to phone the police. Oy. Don't get me wrong, they did have us working in a place with a hot dog machine that was potentially going to go on fire, and did at one point, but, they at least were totally cool with you calling the police. It so happened that store actually was robbed at one point as well, and in my experience, it doesn't keep people away from your store so much as it encourages them to come in and ask you questions like, was this store robbed? Was this store robbed? Bloody looky-loos. God, I hated that place. Thankfully I'm free of it now. Actually, I had a different number one originally for this video. I'd recorded it and everything, I listened to it back and I was actually quite pleased with it. But I'm not sure about the legal ramifications of me using it. You see, I do, of course, as with every story, have full permission to use it from the author. Unfortunately, the story I'm talking about, if you look at the Let's Not Meet stories on Reddit, you may have actually read this story. And it was about a guy who had contacted this woman, mistakenly thinking that she was the woman he had actually been stalking. They happened to have the same name, and I think they did the same job, but she was a different person. And she gave him a very just direct response, no, I am not the person, you know. And that was it, one line. And he decided in response to send her this very lengthy, detailed email. And that, of course, was part of the story she published, explaining the experience, and she copy-pasted the email as well. So I'm not sure about the legality of me using that story. I mean, I'd actually recorded the whole thing, and I was listening to it back before I started thinking about this. Oh, I'm not sure if I could do that. So I've got this story there sitting on my hard drive. I'm not sure I can do anything with. It was an issue of I don't want this person, the person who wrote that email, to hear the story in the video and think, oh no, I can't have that. If they're unstable enough to stalk someone, they would certainly be unstable enough to abuse the copyright system. Even though it probably would fall under fair use. Maybe, kinda, possibly. Again, it's a murky area. I did look up what the legal issues were, the legal ramifications for sharing emails, even if it's permission of one of the parties, and it was hard to find a definite answer. So that story will sit on my hard drive till I can figure out if there's anything I can do with it, because I was quite pleased with how it turned out, actually. But well, we'll see. Okay, I think that's enough rambling for now, so I'm going to head off for the moment. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.